Good afternoon. This is Glenn Prezzano. I am the founder and publisher of Marinelli Magazine, and this is the 495.
Wait a second. What are you doing here? Where's Doug?
Well, Doug has an upper body injury.
What?
He skated in warm-ups, and
such a hockey thing.
he just couldn't go.
Couldn't go?
He couldn't go, so they pulled me out of retirement.
How upper body? Like above the waist, above the shoulders?
Above the waist.
Okay. Right.
Upper body.
Yeah.
That's why they say upper body.
Yeah.
So there's no Ask the Editor this week.
No.
Because he's not here. He brings the questions.
Right.
So we're going to jump right in.
All right.
With our guest, Dr. Lane Glenn, president of Northern Essex Community College. Welcome to the 495.
Thank you. Great to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, thanks for coming. Well, listen, I figured let's start this by taking a trip down memory lane.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
You're in for it now, Lane.
And I don't know, I'm assuming you remember this, but it's probably not something you think about every day. But back in 2011, when you were first became president of Northern Essex, we did a feature in the magazine at the time called Coffee Talk, which was sort of a live interview and photo shoot held at coffee shops. And you remember that?
I do, as a matter of fact. That was an enjoyable conversation.
Don't do the close-up on the photos, though.
He looks very young.
It was a few years ago.
Hair's dark. He's got a suit on for you?
Yeah. But that was the first time we actually met each other.
Yeah.
Was at the coffee shop, which no longer exists. Unfortunately, the building is there, but the coffee shop isn't.
And the magazine is going strong, and I love that.
And the magazine, we're both still here, which is always a good thing. But we're not really here to talk about you as college president, are we? We're here to talk about your recent expedition in Africa.
We can do that.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your trek up Kilimanjaro?
Just returned less than 2 weeks ago from Africa, and one of those trips of a lifetime. The tallest freestanding mountain in the world, along with my much younger brother and some friends of his. I was with a passel of 30-year-olds, which was instructive in its own way.
Okay.
And yes, we managed a 6-day trek up Mount Kilimanjaro.
So it took you did 6 days, because back in 2018, as you probably recall, Teresa Park,
Yep.
who is I think she's still the planning director at the city of Lawrence, or I'm not sure.
Not for long, but she's on her way over to the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Happy day. We're all very happy about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't know that, but that's great news. But Teresa climbed in 2018 and then wrote a piece for us about that, and I believe her trip was 8 days.
Yeah,
so you guys did 6.
There's a few different routes. We did what's considered sort of the mid route, right? You need some time to adjust to the altitude.
Okay.
There's a shorter route that's 4 days that has a very low success rate.
We tried the 4-day thing, and you kind of, that was pushing it.
Right, yes.
That was
a different 4-day trek.
Right, we don't... enough with the 4 days.
We had everybody survived, but
and all the voyagers are probably in agreement.
Right, they want longer days.
So 6 days for Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, 6 was the mid-range. So we went what's called the Mashame route, which is really like 5 days up and a day and a half out kind of a thing. Teresa, I think, went the Lamosha route, which is sometimes locally referred to as the Coca-Cola route, which is an 8-day route.
Okay.
Just a little extra time to adjust. You're on your way up.
Why the Coca-Cola?
The locals, that's their name for this thing.
And what is the local name for the trek that you took?
They've got sponsorship, Glenn.
Was I not supposed to mention that?
That's right. Thanks.
No plugs.
A freebie. I'm the ad guy. You're not supposed to mention sponsors unless they paid. But anyway,
ours was a very scenic route, right? Yep. So we got to climb the Barranco Wall and some spots along the way that just are really some magnificent scenery.
Well, so I had a question about physical conditioning, and for those that who don't know you, you're very active, to say the least, and not just riding an exercise bike like me. You're sort of out doing actual adventures, skiing and bike riding and hiking,
as much as possible,
and going down the river. And I had a question about how physically fit somebody has to be to actually climb this, or is it a climb, or is it more of a hike, or is it
more of a hike
on the route?
Honestly, I was able to proudly say to a lot of people while I was there, who aren't from New England, that the White Mountains, and particularly Mount Washington, have far worse conditions than Mount Kilimanjaro. They absolutely do.
Right.
They get colder, they get windier. The rocks are harder in places to climb over. Mount Kilimanjaro is much more of a hike than it is a climb. There's a few places where you got to scramble and do some things that are maybe technically challenging, but not as much as you can often find in the White Mountains. It's the altitude, right? That's the big difference.
Right.
It's that
Right.
thin air.
And Teresa wrote about that in her article,
Yeah.
which is available on mvmag.net. We will plug ourselves.
It is. You can still find it there.
The
I looked at it
article is
before
there.
I went. I wanted to see what I
Good.
could learn. Absolutely.
So we're sort of required
A
reading
resource,
is what
you
you're saying
bet.
for the Merrimack Valley.
You bet. I tell everybody.
Another shameless plug. There's going to be
Nothing
a,
shameless about
There's
that.
going to be a lot of
That's
them.
good advice.
But so all right. So overall physical fitness is what
Yeah.
somebody's going to need for something like this. But how much hiking experience? I mean,
Well, almost everybody on our trek was a fairly accomplished hiker. There were a couple who were physically fit in other ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were runners or cyclists, kind of a thing. But
Right.
everybody had some level of physical fitness.
Okay.
You know, you don't want to just get up off the couch after a few years and decide you're going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Probably, you might not do very well, but I will say it doesn't require that you are a world-class athlete. It really doesn't.
Okay.
I saw somebody yesterday who commented on the blog post that I had written about the trip and said, "Wow, that's magnificent." I said, "You should think about it sometime." And this is a woman who teaches for us at the college, and she's pretty physically fit. She teaches Zumba classes. I said, "You could do that." She said, "No, no, no." I said, "You know who the oldest person was to climb Mount Kilimanjaro? She was 89, and she just
Wow.
did it last July."
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, it's possible.
that's something,
89.
actually, yeah.
So it is. And that's
Wow.
kind of rare.
so
That's
there's
the-
hope for me, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, a few years.
you know,
All right, several.
get off the bike and actually go
Yeah,
outside.
yeah.
I know, but it's cold out right now. So,
It is.
You know, I don't like running in the cold.
Yeah.
I know you do.
I love it.
I know you do. I know you do. So, another question I had is, because it's more of a hike and not a climb. Like, I know the little I know about this topic. Like, climbing Mount Everest is a thing now for people who've got a couple of bucks.
Yeah, right. It's expensive.
Okay, and I'm guessing that it's not as challenging to be going up Kilimanjaro than Everest. But Everest has had this issue of really inexperienced people climbing and dying on the
Yeah,
mountain because
yeah.
they really don't know what they're doing and shouldn't be there. You know, is Kilimanjaro as crowded? Were there a lot of people with you? Is it the thing to do, when you're not really qualified to do Everest? Because I've joked to you in the past about when you're climbing Everest.
Yeah. Definitely, there are a lot of people climbing Kilimanjaro because it is manageable as those things go, right? There were two people in our group who had climbed to base camp of Everest, which is actually a little lower than Kilimanjaro. It's at 17,000 something. Had made that part of the trip. It's a little misleading what you see about Everest because those, like the line of people, of course, that we all
Right,
saw.
right.
That's largely because of weather conditions and the narrow window that you have to climb, right? You've got only a few days annually you can do that. So there aren't nearly as many people trying to climb Everest as there are trying to climb Kilimanjaro. Huge difference.
Right.
If for those folks who might want to try something, life-altering and really challenging, Kilimanjaro is an accomplishable thing for probably more people than you might think.
So there are many people that feel that way, though, because obviously, in climbing a mountain like Everest, there are a few ways to go in a short window. I'm guessing the window is not as
Right.
small for Kilimanjaro, and that there are at least 2 or 3 different ways to go up.
Right.
So, but did it feel like it was crowded?
We weren't waiting in lines.
No.
But we
Okay.
certainly saw plenty of other people. And Kilimanjaro, you're required to go with guides. People are typically also using porters. So, but for every climber, you got at least a couple of other people on the mountain for each climber.
Right. Okay. So there's typically 2.
It depends on the size of your group, but
Okay.
we had 12 people in our group. We had 36 porters and guides and all this. It was a big group, right?
Wow. Now, did everybody know each other, or it was sort of a
there were
mix?
5 of us who sort of knew one another, and then we met the other 7 there.
And
You get to know each other very quickly.
And what's the process for? So you guys decided to do this. Is there an outfitter that you go to? Like, what's the process?
Yeah,
what's-
there are various guide groups. We happen to use one. I'm supposed to plug them here, but I will. G Adventures, they're awesome.
Okay.
And they do treks all around the world, right? So I'm looking ahead to maybe doing something with them in Antarctica, which, world's biggest desert. Let's go. Lots to do down there.
You're going to Antarctica.
Yeah, I'd like to. It's on the list, yeah. Anyway, so these groups...
We might have to send a photographer with you.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah. One of our cold tolerant folks.
Not you.
Kevin Harkins, who was on last week, is going to
Yeah.
see this and go, I'm not going to Antarctica.
He's already sending you the email.
He's already
They
writing
popped up on the
email.
screen. There it is.
Don't
Kevin's
call me.
Actually, Kevin can surprise you sometimes. He may go, wait, no, I will do that. He does surprise us from time to time with the assignments that he likes that I wouldn't expect. So, but that's something you really have to document.
Well, we'll love to. So anyway,
Yeah.
these groups
Wow.
that arrange these tours,
Yeah.
it's pretty comprehensive. In terms of what they will make sure you're prepared to do. Right?
Okay. How?
They'll go so far for the people who don't have it as to provide equipment, rent equipment.
Well, I was going to ask you that question. How much of your own stuff? I know you have a lot of that kind of stuff. Did you bring?
I winter camp frequently, so I have everything.
Okay,
that
so you
I
brought
need.
your own gear.
Yeah,
Okay.
we did. But there were.
But if you were me and you're like, you got like a thin little jacket,
then come see me and I'll help you. I'll help outfit you.
Or the guides who I can just pay some money.
Well,
and
and actually, at the end, what some people will frequently do if they buy some stuff is, leave it there for the guide. They don't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a terribly poor place on the planet. It really is.
Wow.
Moshi, which is the largest city at the base of the mountain there, is desperately poor. And these guides, earn the equivalent of, $7 a day. From the company, and then of course you can provide some extra gratuity, but they don't earn a lot of money.
But the climbing is good for the local economy, or no?
It has to be at some level because it's providing some employment. It's one of the things that we talked a bit. So the other guys that I was there with, my brother and his friends, are all MBA graduates from Cornell. They're heavily into figuring this kind of stuff out.
Right.
And we had a lot of conversations about the economics of this and what it seemed it should be doing for the local economy that it actually doesn't seem.
Yeah,
to be doing
and unfortunately,
to the
sometimes with travel,
Yeah.
it doesn't have the impact that people might think it is having, and I'm not sure.
Yeah.
That's a big question.
It is.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a big
the
question.
most of the people we talked to and interacted with, including our guides and porters and people in the town, their monthly rent for wherever they were staying is the equivalent of about $20 US.
Right.
It's just the scale of things is preposterously different. The people who will buy equipment will often leave it for the guides and the porters, and that's how they outfit
So
themselves.
you weren't just thinking about survival while you were climbing this. You could actually contemplate and think about other things since you were
Absolutely. I
having this
wrote along the
conversation.
way and had some great conversations. The distance is actually not terribly long because
I had a question about that. So your vertical height, because the base is around 7,500 feet?
around 6 actually.
Around 6?
660 feet, somewhere in there.
Okay.
65, so, yeah.
And then so your actual vertical climb is 14,000 feet. But how many miles were you actually hiking to?
It varies. I think the longest day we had, well, actually the last day, I guess, when we summit and then come back down again and hike out was probably the longest, and that might have been a 14 or 15 mile day, which is that's a long day.
Up and back.
Yeah. And that's a long day, but you can certainly log longer than that up in the White Mountains pretty easily.
Right.
So it's really, again, the altitude. The distance is not that far. There were some days it was only a few miles because, the most frequent phrase you hear on that mountain is pole pole, which is Swahili for slowly, slowly, right? Take it easy. Don't try to go fast.
How did you do with the...
Pretty well, the altitude. Yeah, I mean, it affects everybody at some level.
Right.
A little bit of a headache. A little shortness of breath. My brother and I both had done some hiking out in the Canadian Rockies and the Tetons, which you can get 13,000, 14,000 feet in those places. Still, that other 6,000 feet makes a difference.
Well, I was going to say, you did that rather recently, too. So was that in part in preparation?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had gone out and hiked across the Tetons in August, and then out around the Canadian Rockies last June. So a little bit of practice.
So you guys did do some prep. I mean, it wasn't just like,
Right.
as you said, couch potato to,
Right.
climbing a 20,000-foot mountain. Okay.
Right.
But not anything crazy extreme where, like, if you actually wanted to, do mountaineering and you wanted to do it the right way,
I would
you would
need some
train
practice.
a little bit differently than...
So one of the things that
Yeah.
we started to look at was, maybe a Denali climb, which would require more technical
climbing
and,
skills.
And the conditions are a lot harsher at the top of Denali. Denali is a little bit taller than Kilimanjaro, highest in North America, and tops out a little above 20,000 feet. But the conditions up there, the barometric pressure, the cold conditions all the time, it's a lot harsher, and the success rate's a lot lower.
Interesting. But is that in the thought process?
It's in the thought process. I don't know where it's going to go. We'll see.
Well, I mean, after you've achieved certain things in these kinds of athletics, I mean, you are clearly the kind of person who likes to challenge yourself for the sake of challenging yourself.
So, yeah, pretty much, yeah.
I mean, my ideal vacation is sitting in a lounge chair on a cruise ship with a cocktail in my hands, and yours is climbing mountains.
You say that. I think you can do that for a short period of time, but your mind is always so busy. I don't know how long you could sit in that lounge chair.
But I use that. But see, I can't really go away for more than about a week, so that's all I have. So I don't really have a frame of reference.
Fair enough.
If I had more time,
fair enough.
What would I do with it? But I use that experience actually to shut it off.
Okay.
But I'm intrigued by these things that you do. And speaking about Washington, I mean, you did a bike, run, swim, ski
the
down
Tuckerman's Pentathlon.
Yeah, skiing down the bowl at the end, which when you told me that, I'm like, that was the last thing of this big... was skiing the bowl?
Highly recommend that one. You can do it as a team, you can do it individually, but it's a lot of fun. It's the Tuckerman's Pentathlon. It's a fundraiser for the Friends of Tuckerman's Ravine up there, and
I mean, it's a gorgeous spot for people who've never actually seen it. And I've only seen it skiing Wildcat years ago, and basically fallen on my butt because I was looking at the bowl instead of paying attention to what I was doing.
The hardest part of that thing was the bike ride, and you've got listeners, I'm sure, who are cyclists, and I am not. I can ride a bike. I understand how to do it. But I don't own the right equipment. I'm not an avid cyclist. So
I am awesome on my fan bike in the basement.
Yes, there you go.
I was on it this morning. I'm really good at it.
Well, the bike ride of this thing was only 18 miles, which for cyclists is not a very long.
Right.
But it's up a mountain, right? It's up to Mount Washington. And the bike that I had was nearly as old as I am. It was a racing bike from the 19...
That old?
It was. How about that?
Was it one of those big wheel bikes?
It did have two big wheels on it. And for its time, it was probably considered a lightweight racing bike.
I met one of those giant wheels.
Yeah, I know you did. I know, the big knobby sand things. But it was the best part of having this bike in that race was seeing it in the bike rack alongside the $6,000, carbonite racing machines.
Yeah, bikes can be expensive.
I had to dust some rust off of mine before I pedaled it up the mountain. It was a lot of fun.
Were you getting looks from the other side?
I was. Yeah, absolutely. Envious looks, right? He's doing this.
Well, I experienced
and that bike.
I experienced that a little bit. When I was support staff for the Voyager expedition, where there was the glares. Lou, we were glaring at certain people's kayaks.
I'd imagine.
We're not naming names, but he knows who he is.
He's probably listening right now.
But, I think that one of the things that I got from the Voyager, just being around it in the manner that I was the camaraderie that does develop through that sort of shared experience of doing something that's hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we all do that maybe in our work life and such, but when you're doing it in an athletic activity in a compressed period of time, it's sort of a different qualitative nature.
You bet. Yeah, and we saw, some wonderful friendships and relationships that, already existed prior to that trip, but certainly were galvanized, if you will, by the experience. One of my favorite moments was watching State Representative Jim Kelcourse and now State Senator Diana DeZoglio in a tandem kayak, with Jim behind Diana.
I think we ran photos of that.
Oh, yeah, loudly proclaiming that, behind every great senator there's a state rep, helping propel her down the river.
Of the opposite party, right. Yeah.
Well, I wasn't going to mention that part.
Yeah, but that was part of it, and it was fun, and it kind of was a nice bonding experience.
Yeah.
So did you had that on the expedition up Kilimanjaro, and your group, you said, was a dozen folks, and you guys were only, what, 5 or 6?
There were 5 of us, yeah.
So you met new people.
Yeah, a couple of folks from Germany, from Bali, from England, from Australia. They were from all over the place and had come there for different reasons, And definitely along the way, you form, at least some.
Any relationships you think will last?
Well, there's already been a little back and forth with photo sharing and that sort of thing, and
that's great.
We've been invited to Oktoberfest by our German hiking partner, so we'll see who ends up in Munich in which is actually in September, by the way. Oktoberfest starts in September. So
yeah, well that's great. That's actually really cool.
Yeah, it is.
I think that's part of the experience of any kind of traveling. But again, I think it's probably qualitatively different when it's that sort of shared experience and. not you don't know for sure that everyone's going to achieve
There's some
the
struggle,
goal.
and indeed, not everybody in our group did. Not everybody made it to the top. Most of the group did, but
Any surprises as to who did and who didn't?
Not necessarily. I mean, I will say this, from what I understand, that altitude can affect anybody regardless of your fitness level in different ways.
Yeah.
So it's not just about being, a cardio beast
Right.
at the CrossFit gym or anything like that. It can affect anybody. And
That probably scares me the most because I suffer from migraines,
Yeah.
and I shouldn't do this because the microphone picks it up. I just figured that out.
You okay? You need to take a break? You all right?
No, I'm good. Thanks. But I suffer from migraines, and in sort of rereading Teresa's article and having this conversation, that would be my one big fear. And
Yeah.
I get affected by atmospheric pressure. So
Yep.
I'm thinking, gee, am
Could
I
definitely,
going to be
yeah.
the person that gets like 8,000 feet and bails?
It was actually one of the remarkable things, one of the many remarkable. I will say this, everybody in our group made it up to a place called Stella Point, which is almost the summit of Kilimanjaro.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost the summit. It's not terribly far away. It's another 45 minutes, hour, maybe hour 15 of hiking, in the coldest part of the mountain up there. Not everybody made it that far, right? And you're right about the headache part. All of us had some form of that. The other thing that's a challenge at that altitude is you cannot sleep. I mean, you can't sleep.
Why?
The altitude, the breathing, there's a slight disorientation. It's very difficult to sleep. So it's one of the reasons that we hike in the middle of the night, right? We hiked all day, got to a place called Barafu Camp, had 4 hours to rest, but nobody could really rest. You're at 15,000+ feet. It's kind of challenging to really sleep. Got up at midnight, hiked through the night. So basically, 20 hours straight of hiking. Summit, come back down, get lower, and find time to rest. That's typically what the groups will do.
And you leave at around midnight or
Yeah,
1
put
a.m.
the headlamps on at midnight and head up the mountain. I mean, there's probably undoubtedly some listeners out there right now who have done this trek and know what I'm
Right,
talking about. And
right.
Hiking through the middle of the night and getting up there and staying a little bit of time and then getting yourself back down.
It's
again.
one of those things, though, and obviously we like to do it with the magazine to always sort of bring these sort of details out that people don't think about, but just the idea, and then when I reread that in the article, I'm like, wow, midnight, and then you actually had referenced it in the piece that you did in your newsletter as well, and I don't think people think about that, but you want to sort of time it in certain ways for a variety of reasons. That's an awfully long stretch to go without sleeping.
Wait, though, you don't get the payoff of a view?
Oh,
When you
actually,
reach
part of
summit?
the other reason, thank you for asking
Yeah.
that, Lou, the other reason for hiking through the night is if you time it right, which 4 of us did, then you hit Stella Point at dawn.
At sunrise.
At sunrise, and you see the sun. I mean, you're well above the clouds up there, so you're looking down, perhaps over some clouds, which we were, watching the sun come up through them, and it's
Wow.
it's
I'll
heaven.
bet.
Spectacular.
I had a question about snow,
All right.
because in the photos of Teresa at the summit, there was no snow in the photo that we ran. And in your photos, there seemed to be a lot of snow. And I know that there's been issues there, environmental issues. So what was the snow cap like? What did you experience? Was there more or less? And what are the locals saying about that, if anything?
So from just below Stella Point up, completely covered in snow with a fairly good base, I would guess a couple of feet maybe. The week before we were there, it had been hit by 4 or 5 days in a row of 10 to 12 inches a day. Now the average snowfall in December is only a few dozen inches, but they got walloped right before we got there. There are glaciers up there, but they are melting rapidly.
Yeah,
And
because
they're
that's what I understood.
They're
is that
expected
they're
to
having
disappear. Yeah.
And that's what I've read, that they
Right.
are expected to disappear. So
Right.
when I saw your photos, the first thing I thought of, there's a lot of snow.
Yeah.
But sort of just a local weather condition versus...
Yeah, the snow comes and goes. The
Right.
glaciers, are
still receding.
Are still receding. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in previous years we might have said more permanent, but they're really not. They're disappearing.
Right.
quickly.
Right.
They're expected to be gone.
Any conversation with the locals about that?
Oh
Do
yeah,
they notice it?
they do. They're well aware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it impact their life?
Interestingly, the river trip we took last year, of course, ended up focusing a lot of attention on the quality of the water in the Merrimack River.
Yeah.
Sewage overflows, things like that, environmental issues.
Right.
And I'm no expert in that field. I've become a lot more knowledgeable and am continuing to work actually with the River Commission and
Right.
do what we can.
As are we.
Yeah, right, and
Yeah.
do what we can to address those things. Interestingly, Tanzania, which is the country that
Yeah.
hosts this mountain, hasn't completely banned plastic bags. You cannot have one in the country. No plastic bags in Tanzania, and they are intensely interested in the water quality of moving bodies of water, rivers, streams, and what goes in them. And very observant about what's happening in those streams, to the point where when you're crossing them on this trek, the guides will tell you what to do and not to do near the water. It's fresh water source
Right.
for a lot of
Yeah.
people, right? There's a much higher degree of consciousness, it seems, among the local population about those things, maybe out of necessity, right? Because it's not as if you're relying on water purification plants most of the time.
Listen, many communities, as you know, in the Merrimack Valley are getting the drinking water from the Merrimack, and even though there are treatment plants, I still think some of the issues are unacceptable, and need to be addressed. And it's just not top of mind for everybody. So I think the service that we're all doing with these stories and doing these things is raising that awareness.
Yeah, it's come a long way. I was actually in Newburyport just a little while ago, having coffee with a local boatsman who said, "Look, I've been around here my whole life, and it's far better than it was in the 1970s." And,
Right,
and it is.
and no doubt.
Yeah. And that's not reason to say, okay, we've done enough, right?
Right.
We know that there are episodes, during lots of rainfall when the
Had it
sewage
dur- had it
flows
dur-
out into the river.
Had it during the Voyager expedition in August.
And the good news there is that the communities all along the river, including up in New Hampshire, are coming together around these issues and working together.
Has there been movement since the summer?
Yeah, so
and this trip?
so the Senator DeZoglio, who has been really leading this effort to
Right.
form and to lead this Merrimack River District Commission, that commission, which I'm temporarily helping to lead while we've got a transition going on at
course
the
you
Planning
are.
Commission. So we have a meeting coming up on February the 6th that includes partners, up in New Hampshire, Manchester, Nashua.
That's the key thing, though, that I think is great, and that's what I was really asking: is are you getting cooperation
Yes,
from
absolutely.
the New Hampshire side?
Yes.
Because obviously it does flow downriver.
Yeah,
literally.
it does,
So
right.
it's
And
important to
there's
have
recognition there.
have
Some of
both
these
states involved.
Some of these things which we learned about, on that river expedition last summer, are huge legacy issues. A city like Manchester,
Right.
you're talking about over north of $1 billion of infrastructure improvements that have to be made.
Yeah.
That's a big
that's my
lift.
impression. This needs
Right.
to be a federal issue.
And right, it is.
Because
So-
local communities
right.
can't afford to fix what needs
Yeah.
to be fixed.
And later this summer, I think you'll hear, it's not any big secret, so I don't think I'm spilling any beans here.
We can break news, that's okay.
Great. Well, here you go. So I was with Congresswoman Trahan yesterday, who said, yes, she is indeed, organizing another expedition down the river with herself and hopefully Congressman Moulton and our congressional representatives from New Hampshire, because they recognize, too, this is a federal issue.
All right, well, that's good.
There's some joint sponsorship around legislation that would help address this that Congressman Moulton and Congresswoman Trahan have put together. So at the federal level, state level, local level, there's a lot of attention being paid here.
Organizations and people are concentrating on the local level, though, and I think it's misplaced. The pressure has to be placed federally. Because even you talk about Lowell, you talk about Manchester, you talk about the overflow sites, those towns and their taxpayers can't fix this problem. They just can't fiscally do it. It's got
a
to be
big lift.
federally aided.
Yeah, it's a big lift,
Yeah.
and it's going to require a combination of those things, right? Leadership at the local level, resources at the federal level, all that stuff. So, as one of the tasks of this River Commission right now is to put together a pilot flagging project for later this year down in Newburyport, and also while working on that to pull together all the various studies that have been done over the last couple of decades. So we're working with Brown and Caldwell, a firm out of Andover, to help us do that and to help us form a couple of groups to set some specific goals that are agreed upon up in New Hampshire and in Massachusetts. So the team effort is coalescing here, which is wonderful.
I like the notification program, the flag program that you guys are starting, because it's going to raise awareness in the communities, because when they see the flags drop, we're going to get overflows, or this water is a certain quality. It's more day to day to them. They don't get it now. They don't understand. They're looking at the river, it looks the same,
Yeah.
but it's not.
Yeah. And of course, one of the cautions there is we want to be as accurate as possible with such a project, and that's going to require some technology. That's going to require real-time sampling, that sort of thing. Right now, there are some things we know about when these overflows happen and how long they tend to take to flow into certain parts of the river. And you could say, for example, 48 hours after this amount of rain, it's likely that this
Right.
part of the river is going to be contaminated. Exercise caution. You don't want to, of course, raise the alarms farther than they need to go, because you don't want to unnecessarily restrict
Right.
recreation or cause people to panic, right? So there's a balance to be struck there.
Well, I think that if people spend some time in and around the river, and obviously people sort of at the mouth in Newburyport and Amesbury do, but I'm not so sure up in the upper parts that they pay attention to it as much, although they could. And so I think that just when people realize how beautiful it is, the one night was spent at the I'm going to not remember the right name of the boathouse in
The Independence Rowing Club in Nashua.
No, in Lawrence.
Oh, in Lawrence. Oh my gosh,
which is one of the
Abe
most
Bisharis Boathouse. Yeah,
what a gorgeous bend in the river that this boathouse is located at,
magnificent.
and you would never think that you were in the city of Lawrence, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's idyllic, and you spend some time in there. It's like you want to go out in that river. So all of a sudden, you start thinking that it's like, well, okay, but now I want to care about this.
Yep.
Maybe even more so than thinking about where your tap water is coming from. It's a phenomenally great resource, a recreational resource, through its entire length.
Absolutely.
Not just down in Newburyport, where I think, it's been that way. People have known it for a long time. But, Lowell's got a great stretch that's calm, and because of the dam, where people can recreate and do, and you want the clean water. So I think we're all doing a good job of raising awareness, and obviously we're going to continue to be on top of it as a
Great.
subject that we write about, because we're Merrimack Valley Magazine, so how could we not? And we probably haven't done enough of it over the years, as we've discussed. When the Voyager thing first came up, and
Well, you were a big part of the reason that whole thing happened.
and for those
Merrimack Valley Magazine.
and for those that don't, who haven't seen this was our September.
Yeah.
Another shameless plug for the magazine. This was great because and so many people reacted to this cover for I think a lot of different reasons, and not just the cover, the entire issue, the story, and even other things that people maybe discovered because they picked it up for one
Good.
reason and then saw other things. So it really, it really was terrific.
And the story is posted in the Facebook Live chat room, so people can go follow up the story.
There you go.
Yep.
Well, and
That's
that,
fantastic.
I want to say that's not a shameless plug there. That's a service to the community.
know,
It truly is. I have to compliment you because let me say this.
Well, it's about time,
Take
Lane,
the compliment,
all right?
because really, that whole trip happened the way that it did, largely because of you, Glenn Prezzano. It did, right? You and I had a conversation.
Well, you brought it up.
Well, I brought it up, but when I brought it up, it was a little trip with my brother and maybe a couple of guys, Derek Mitchell, Dugan Sherwood.
And look what we've achieved already. Now,
right?
now we've got the federal government giving
Right, now we've got
research.
Wow. That's where it's going.
So make sure
Seriously.
they all know it was me.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said, this could be a thing, and this could be something we cover and write about, and really amplify, not just the environmental issues, by the way, but the economic issues,
I
the
think
recreational issues,
they're all tied together. They're all tied together.
We talked about awareness before. I think more of the task now is priority. I think people have to understand what a priority cleaning up the river and stopping these overflows is, because people are off, even our federal representatives are off dealing with saving the spinners, which is worthwhile and all that stuff. But, this is job one right now. This is the most important thing facing the valley.
Well, I think what's interesting is we know for a fact from the part of the country that you spent a lot of time in that this is an issue of clean water resources in many parts of the country.
Lots of places.
But as you just noted regarding, Tanzania, is that Tanzania, sorry, it's an issue all over the planet where rivers and water sources have basically been open sewers. People didn't know any better. I don't think you can sort of judge past people from past centuries. They didn't know, what they were doing. Now we know, and so it's what we're doing here can be a model for other parts of the country, perhaps, and anything learned along the way applied to other countries.
That's the hope. We're certainly looking at
Yeah.
places like the Mystic River, which has a pilot, which has a flagging project in place, and other each river is different, right?
Out of curiosity, sorry to interrupt you. The flagging project, I don't know a ton about, but I'm obviously understand the concept of it. But why not actually send out alerts, regarding that, the way they would look at with an Amber Alert?
That's one of the possibilities, right? Is so that you can consult a website, you can sign up for text messaging. I don't know yet where it's going to go. It's in the early stages of figuring that out.
Yeah. Is that all the work? That's part of what the district commission is going to be.
That's right. So there's some funding this year to start something like that. It won't cover one end of the river to the other. It won't be everything. It'll be a pilot, right? That's what pilots are about. Yeah. To experiment and to see what we can learn.
And the meeting on February 6th is
hearing from our consultant with Brown and Caldwell, who's going to help us look at all these other research reports that have been conducted, agree on some goals, right? Because there are lots of different ideas
for the pilot.
Not just for the flagging project, right? But overall goals for as we knit together resources. What are some short, medium, long-range things that we can do to address these water quality issues all the way up and down the river, right? This is where that teamwork comes together.
But I think it's important for people to walk the boardwalk in Newburyport and there's sewage in the river, and just get that conversation started with everybody.
Well, one of the things that was a little disturbing to me when the first day of the Voyager expedition, when we saw some dead fish in the water just floating. And we weren't really sure where that. And that was quite north of where. And I guess there was some. I don't know the exact status of whatever the plants are up there, but it was a bit of a surprise. But when you see that, as you allude to, it makes you think immediately, wait a minute, why is that? What's going on here?
Right. And when you see them floating above white wall tires, which haven't been in style for a few decades, and they've been in that river a while, there's work to be done. And there are organizations doing that work. Shout out to Groundwork Lawrence, shout out to a number of different organizations up and down the river that are hauling things out of the river.
My God,
helping to clean it
Clean
up.
River Project, absolutely.
All that, right? Yeah. So there's the good news is there are a lot of hands on deck.
Yeah.
And progress will be made.
I don't know how something like clean water can ever be controversial.
Really?
I think it's it's not the objective, right? It's how do we get from here to there that presents the problems, and hopefully it can be worked out in a way that works for everybody. And again, maybe it serves as a model for other ways of working collaboratively to achieve certain goals. But who's going, I don't want clean water. I don't know.
Yeah, to your point, once we know something, shame on us if we don't act on it, right? I live in Amesbury, upriver a little ways from what is now a condominium complex referred to as the Hat Factory, because that's what it used to be.
Right, yep.
And of course that phrase, mad as a hatter, comes from the use of mercury in shaping hats, which was a common practice. And indeed, across the street from the Hat Factory is a little pond that used to have a problem with mercury, and when the water would fill up and it would overflow into the river, you'd have mercury in the Merrimack River. That's what we used to do.
How recently?
Oh, it's been a long time. It's clear now. It's safe.
But I mean, years or decades or...
at least years. I couldn't pinpoint it for you, but there's a development going in around that pond now, so they had to recertify that indeed the pond is safe, and it is. So I don't mention it for that reason, but rather to your point, in the past, we may not have known some things that we know now. Right. Once we know them, shame on us if we don't act on that.
Yeah, but who's objecting to it? I mean, again, you could object to funding mechanisms, scarce resources.
That's the objection. Because as a taxpayer of Newburyport, for example, when they go to the town and look for money to mitigate this, I'm thinking we can mitigate all we want. When Lowell's releasing, when Nashua is releasing, when Manchester's releasing, it's not doing any good.
But that's where this raising of awareness, I think, is really excellent, and getting folks at all levels, both private and public sector, to care about it, and to address it. I mean, we have sort of, I've told Doug, the injured reserve, Doug,
upper body injury,
but I want to continue to follow this, and with what we're doing on the digital side, it's not just going to be when the magazine comes out every other month. I mean, we can do this on a daily basis as things happen, and I hope that people will come to us to find some of this information on an ongoing basis, because it matters. I mean, the name of the magazine is Merrimack Valley, because of the river, right? And I've always said, the market area is where the river runs.
Absolutely.
And that's sort of our whole reason to be. So how do we not do this? And maybe shame on us for not doing it earlier, but things didn't sort of come together. Although we have done, we did a story on Clean River Project, many years ago, but not with the kind of follow-up that we're hoping to now, so that we continue to raise awareness about what's going on, and because when you're talking about financial resources, you have to make choices, and that's just life, at every level, personal and otherwise. But who's against clean water? So it's,
the
shouldn't be hard.
The shortest and probably best definition of politics that I've ever heard is, the allocation of scarce resources. And,
actually, the best one I ever heard when I was in school, and I'm not going to remember his name at this point, but it was a political scientist from the 50s who defined politics as who gets what, when, and how.
Yeah.
And I'm going to
similar.
And in the middle of the night, I'm going to remember the guy's name.
What I want to see is I want to see Lori
call me.
Trahan and Seth Moulton and our senators focusing on this, prioritizing this, because this is the thing right now. Go represent us. Go get us the money. New Hampshire as well. New Hampshire has to take a part in this as well.
And that's what I think is great, because I think that I think there's been a feeling that they haven't
Absolutely.
been,
The commitment's there.
And if there's been if some of the effect of what we've already done, just with a story, with having done this with all of your efforts and the Watershed Council and Senator DeZoglio, getting the folks up north to pay attention is fantastic. Do you know when they're planning to do the trip? Because Lori was supposed to be on this one, was she not?
She was, and for a variety of reasons, the
Yeah.
scheduling didn't work out. But I saw her yesterday, and they haven't set a date yet, but she's trying to arrange it so that we have congressional representatives from up in New Hampshire, as well as she and Seth Moulton.
I will pass the word along to
New
her.
Hampshire and Nashua has actually made a concerted effort. They've got holding tanks to catch some of the overflow. It hasn't been a full solution. It was very costly to them.
Yeah,
but they've made a sincere attempt.
And the city of Manchester, if I'm recalling this correctly from the press conference during the Voyager expedition, they had a timeline, though, that was like 10 or 20 years long.
That's a function of the investment.
And that was the money.
Yeah. It's a lot of infrastructure. It's a big capital project.
Yeah.
It's a huge capital project.
So perhaps that can be accelerated if
resources are put on the
different choices
table.
are made. Yeah.
Right.
Which is good. Well, we'll contact the appropriate people so they keep us in the loop.
You
do
can be
as
sure
well?
of that. Yes.
Good. Well, no, because
We'll keep you in the loop.
we want to definitely do the the coverage of that expedition, and I have vowed to be on it next time and not support team, because I think we worked harder.
So I don't know if I think Congresswoman Trahan's expedition is probably separate from this one, but my understanding. So Dan Graveck, our friend at the Merrimack River Watershed Council, chair of the board there, and Dugan Sherwood, who's the president of the Haverhill Chamber, I think maybe already even secured some grant funds for this year's trip, and are starting to put together.
I've suggested to Dan, that we go though to the Pemigewasset, find the actual source that before it becomes the Merrimack.
Up in the North Pole somewhere.
Yeah, I want to find
Iceland.
find a little trickle that becomes the Merrimack.
You got to do that during the snow melt, so you've got enough water to do that.
We do. So we have some things that we do here.
All right, what do you do?
One of them we're dropping, though. We're going to not do it.
Right. Is that what we decided?
Is that because of me?
We decided because Lane just
I'm not up
wouldn't
to it?
stop talking.
No.
Because timeliness reasons. But if you want to know about 8 great things to do this weekend, please visit mvmag.net tomorrow morning.
I love that.
And,
I read that.
And sign up.
Always helpful.
Get the newsletter, the alert.
We don't want
that
to
you're
date
getting
this
them.
podcast, Lane, so they come back and they listen to you years later and find out about Kilimanjaro and
8
the
great
river
things
project.
to do that happened years ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we are going to keep Little Bits.
Yes.
Because Little Bits was a feature in the magazine years ago that we used to do all the time. Little historical, often things that related to the Merrimack Valley. And oddly enough, this was in an issue. I think it's the same issue, is it not? No, it's not. But this was one about Leonard Bernstein.
Oh, yeah.
Famous composer. And you're a theater guy. You like theater.
Indeed.
And, for a lot of younger folks, they probably have no clue who he is. But he's a very famous Laurentian. And I didn't even realize until rereading this, he only passed away in 1990, which in our lifetime is not that long ago. Seems like yesterday. I remember the 90s
Since you
vividly.
brought it up, yeah.
Since I brought it up, and
It was like 10 minutes ago, right?
yeah. But what's also interesting, because we were searching around, this morning for like what little bits, we're going to add for this, because I think it's a fun thing, and without sort of diving into and reading it completely, he was born in 1918, and it became a world famous composer
Absolutely.
and pianist, and did lots of different things. But he also did a lot of Broadway shows, and one of the most famous he did was West Side Story, which is being revived. I don't know if you knew that or not, but it's going back to Broadway, and it's opening on February 20th.
Are we going? We didn't take a road
Interesting. No, I'm just making the connection for those, Leonard Bernstein, born in Lawrence,
trip? Yeah.
That's one of
famous
the.
composers, and they're resurrecting on Broadway
big
with
upset.
a new. What's a big upset?
I just saw West Side Story about a year ago and thinking to myself, they could never do this today. Never, ever would they do this
And they
today.
are, but
Yeah.
they are making changes. I don't know if they're making
would imagine.
changes to the storyline. Well, I know they're making changes to the music. And they're doing something that I know I like, and they're actually turning it into just a one-act, show. But I wanted to just talk about that a little bit, theater. And,
All right. You're more on top of the West Side revival than I am, but I try to keep up with.
Well, we were just down this past weekend in New York, visiting the kids,
Yeah.
and they bought us tickets to a Broadway show for Christmas, and we went to see Hadestown, which I don't know if you've heard of, but it won a bunch of Tony Awards this year.
And was it worth all the acclaim?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. It's one of those shows I want to see again.
Ah, all right.
So you actually have, and this was in our coffee talk,
Yeah.
a theater background.
I do.
And I think that's very interesting, and why don't you talk about
When
that?
I became-
what it does for you?
Yeah, right.
What it has done for you?
President of the college, I did a couple interviews. One of them was not with you at the time, but with newspapers, and at least twice, different reporters said to me, first question out of the chute, so, a theater degree, and they did that with their face, right? They made this expression like, how the heck, right?
Wait, so did we.
I realize this is a podcast. People are listening to this, and
Well, we're on Facebook Live too.
so I had to explain that there is probably no better preparation and education and training. Oh yeah, there it is. Oh,
First question with you,
We have
too.
to start here. Your PhD. It was one of you guys. Yeah, it was.
So I don't know if they made if Chris Markins, who wrote the article, made the face or not, though. I don't
remember
that. I don't recall.
I remember very distinctly sitting at the Sylvan Street
Wait a second,
Grill.
you have a PhD in theater?
I do.
There is a PhD
There
in
is,
theater?
yeah.
That's a surprise, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
And as I said, probably to Chris and certainly to this other reporter that I'm remembering, there's no better preparation for leadership than an education in the arts, and particularly in the performing arts. Now think about this,
Yep.
right? If you're going to be, say, a director in the theater, then you have to know how to work with a bunch of creative, quirky personalities.
Yes.
And,
I'm familiar with
bring
that.
them,
I work with a lot of great
bring them
quirky
together around a
personalities.
common vision.
Right.
Right? And goals. Get them working collaboratively. And by the way, you have to create a product that people are going to buy. You have to put people in seats. Right?
And you have limited resources.
Limited
to do it.
resources, constantly fundraising, grant writing, scrapping for every little bit. You've got to become, some sense of good business.
Right.
All of the communication skills.
You said little bits.
All
I
these
just wanted to
things.
say this is
This
all
is too
about
much?
little
This
bits.
is-
No, this is perfect.
Oh, okay, all right,
That's
you
the
are
name of
right.
the section.
Little bit, yeah.
We're in our little bit section.
Yeah, so all of those things that you learn, learning the performing arts, are incredibly applicable to just about any leadership role, and certainly leadership at a college, where we rely on creative, admittedly sometimes quirky personalities, right, who are incredibly talented.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah, hopefully around a common vision for where we're going with the college, with students, with academic programs, all those things. And you've got to have a fairly high tolerance for ambiguity sometimes, and
Yep.
thriftiness and resourcefulness when it comes to getting things done on short budgets. All that stuff, right?
So you've been doing this a while, and you've told that story, I'm sure, to many folks over the years. Has any?
Did that sound like recited? I'm sorry.
No.
Let me freshen that up a bit.
Yeah, the tenor of that question was a little off.
Okay, this is my first show.
You're doing very well.
No, it's fine.
Do I have to fire myself?
No.
Doug's at home shaking his head.
No,
right
it
now.
was fine. It was just it was carrying a payload. That's all.
Okay.
His upper body injury didn't affect his neck. He's able to shake his head.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't really know, but But no, I would say, have you inspired anyone to follow that path for those reasons that you know
performing
of?
arts?
Yeah.
I know of at least 2 lawyers. Probably not the answer you expected, but I know
I was
at
thinking
least
like
I know at
Northern
least
Essex students
2
who may have
lawyers who I encouraged to take some acting classes,
Oh.
and some speech classes. Some students.
How many people on the planet do you think have PhDs in theater? How many of those people are there?
Well, they range into the hundreds, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some of them.
Sounds
That's
about
going to be
right,
tough
yeah.
for us to fact check that
Yeah,
one. I don't
yeah.
know.
Well, when I was looking at doctoral programs back in the late 80s, early 90s, there were about 30 of them in America at that time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Programs.
That would have been about my guess.
Oh, 30
Yeah,
programs.
30
okay.
programs,
Oh,
not
I see.
people.
Yeah,
30
okay.
programs.
Yeah.
And, each of them producing some number of
Sure. Yeah.
doctors a year. Not very many, but some number. So
Well, there's an argument that your choice of PhD has served you well.
I think so.
Unless this has all been an act the last 9 years, which I don't think it is. But, but I'm just because that I think that is an unusual path, and do you share that with students at all?
Oh, absolutely, sure.
and-
In fact, I sometimes, not just with students at the college, also with other professionals in higher education, I do a workshop from time to time called The Accidental President, in which I explain, well, first of all, no 10, 11, 12-year-old in the history of the world has ever looked up at mom and dad and said, I want to be a community college president when I grow up. It's never happened. It's not on anybody's radar ever. It's a wonderful job, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
You just don't know about it, and if you do, you're probably not aspiring toward it at that age.
I think there's a lot of things like that, though. And that's why I think
True.
it's very
Fair
interesting
enough.
that we just don't know about when we're young,
Yeah.
And it's an interesting path, and I would imagine for anybody listening, and hearing that you've taken that path, it sort of opens up some thought processes. Is what else is out there? What else can I do? Where might it take me?
I encourage students all the time to remain open to other possibilities, whatever their career ambition might be. Recognize that most people, think about all the people
Yeah.
most people aren't doing exactly what they went to school for. Right. At some point in their lives, they've changed. They've evolved somehow.
I think that's especially true of people of our generation. I think it might be getting a little bit better with the younger generation. You could speak to that better. You do a lot of very sort of practical training.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's a better or worse thing necessarily. It's a thing. It's not.
Well, I was 40 when I figured it out. When I started the magazine. So.
Well, when I say that, what I mean is, people who are open to other possibilities, evolving into different careers. Whether it doesn't have to be leadership roles in those careers, but different opportunities, right? And maybe they're sort of closely associated with what you studied, maybe not. It's actually one of the tricky things about this concern over practical education versus a liberal arts degree.
Right.
It depends on how far out you look. All those people who might be listening who are afraid that son or daughter is studying philosophy or liberal arts or something, they think they're not going to get a paycheck.
Yeah.
You look 40 years out, those are the people who are making more money and have made more over the course of a lifetime. They are. Their jobs are more secure oftentimes.
Is that statistically backed up?
Yeah, absolutely. Just 2 days ago, Inside Higher Ed had a study out about this on liberal arts education. This is not to malign any of it. Listen, anything you're going to school for to better yourself, to get a career out of that's going to get you some form of stable, hopefully benefited employment that you can raise a family on, power to you. And especially if you love it. That's the important thing, right? Do what you love. You never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
And don't be so afraid of a liberal arts education, of a performing arts education, right?
Yeah.
They can take you lots of different places.
Yeah. I just think there's a more of a concern for practicality these days, and I know I've got one in the arts and I've got one in the medical field, and we're so happy with the one in the medical field because we're like, okay, not going to have to worry about that one, and and obviously my son's doing just fine, but that's a different kind of concern as a parent, thinking about how you're going to put food on the table,
Yeah.
But and this is your business, so it's a little bit different than those of us that are just sort of worried about our kids and are they going to be okay. Where you have many hundreds, if not thousands.
Yeah, and as because we know one another, outside of this booth, I also have a child
Should we have told people that?
who's a musician,
Yeah.
right? Who so far has, made a little bit of money playing her music. music and is studying music business and industry, and is within a year or two going to launch herself out there professionally. Yeah. And I have every confidence in her, one way or the other. She's going to land on her feet and do well.
And I think I have the same feeling about my son, that no matter what, he has an incredible work ethic, and that he would find a way, and he has. Yeah. But to your point earlier, not necessarily like he thought it was going to take him.
Right.
It's taken him in some areas that he didn't expect, and they're not bad.
Right.
At all. They're just and he's making it work. And
what a gift to be a musician, whether you're making your full living at it or not. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's something to be said for enjoying what you do. Even if there are periods of time in which you make less money at it.
So let's talk about that's a good segue.
Okay,
I think.
Different little bits?
No. I think it's a great way to end, maybe, is to talk about some of the things that are going on at the school that are new, because in the sort of creative area, you've got some exciting new things coming up.
Lots of different fronts, right? So, let's talk directly about performing arts, maybe, right? So,
before you go down that path, remember what I told you before we went on air, that I'm doing the intermittent fasting. So I haven't eaten.
Oh boy!
So my brain was going into one particular thing.
Okay, you want to do that first? Okay, let's do that.
No, you do. I'm just telling you where it came from.
I was going to save that for last, so you could rush out and get a snack if you needed it. Sure, let's go there. So there's a 10-story building going up on the banks of the Merrimack River in downtown Haverhill.
Who built that?
Sal Lapoli. Napoli Companies.
I've heard of
is
him.
Building, he's in lots of places, and thankfully he's in Haverhill. And he's building something called the Heights, which is well named. Certainly the tallest building for a long distance.
In Haverhill. Oh yeah.
And at the ground floor is going to be a marvelous new restaurant, and at the 10th floor is going to be a place called the Sky Bar, which is going to have the best view in the Merrimack Valley. And on a couple floors in between, Northern Essex Community College will open a new Hospitality and Culinary Arts Institute in just a couple of months, where we'll be offering some cooking classes for those who are hobbyists, wine pairing and couples cooking classes, but we'll also be offering certificates and degrees in hospitality, culinary management, and culinary arts, want to be a chef sort of thing.
And I think that is fantastic, because that is such a, and for those who are not familiar with Merrimack Valley Magazine, we're sort of a third of a food magazine. Right?
Magnificently so, yes.
And one of the challenges that almost every restaurateur that I know is dealing with are staffing, just not having enough people, but trained people as well. So I think that I think the timing is fantastic, and to have this, in Haverhill, a few miles from where we're sitting, right now, is fantastic. So when is that scheduled to actually be open, and the degree programs starting?
We'll have some community cooking classes starting in the spring, and then the degree classes, the credit stuff, will begin in the fall.
So you guys are built out, ready to rock?
Not today as we sit here. It's being built out, and
okay.
it will be
couple of months.
Yeah, and the building itself is going to be taking shape for the rest of 2020. It's a big project.
Oh no, understood.
And it's going to be magnificent.
I think we'll have to have a follow-up meeting at Sky Bar.
I think you'll love that. It's going to be magnificent. Yes. So that's some exciting news that the college is working on.
So what else is going on?
Well, earlier today, and you can see this on our social media, you'll see some announcements about some focus groups happening in Lawrence next week, looking at a potential renovation of St. Anne's Church. Oh. The big parish hall there, and the church that has been empty for a very long time, decades now. And the college and Paramount Developers, which owns the property, and the city, sort of jointly looking at what a significant renovation of that property might do if it were turned into a performing arts and function facility.
Oh, I love that. That is fantastic, because I think that that's what the city needs. All great cities are going to have a few things, in my opinion. Yeah. Obviously, it needs to have a great school. Yeah. And I think another part of that is professional, and non-professional art space, performing art space, all kinds of art space. And Lawrence definitely has some art space, but not performing art. So I think that is a fantastic development.
And not this big. It's a huge space, and there's a possibility of a couple of spaces within the properties there. So if you are interested, and certainly any of your listeners who may have some feedback on this project, we've got some open forums happening next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I think it is.
We might be interested in
That'd be
covering some of
wonderful.
that stuff.
So we're
You
there.
know.
It's all
We do some arts and culture too.
You do.
We do
Lots of it.
We do some arts and culture.
That's where I learn what's
Yes.
going on.
You know, yeah. No, that's really a great development. So the third aspect, and I don't know how we're going to deal with that, is professional sports. I think that having a great sports teams, and you know, we will have a story coming up in probably May regarding minor league baseball and minor league baseball's impact on communities. You know, we love the Spinners and we love the Fisher Cats up in Manchester, and you know, these things need to exist. They're really great for the communities, along with arts, you know, the whole spectrum of arts, and a great food scene. These are all critical things. So before we wrap up, anything else you want?
What's going on with athletics? So, I thought that's what you were asking.
Well,
you've
got a good baseball team.
We've got an awesome baseball team. 7 out of the last 9 years, they've gone to the Junior College World Series.
Only 7 out of 9.
Actually, community.
What happened to the other 2 years?
We had a college south of us in Rhode Island bump into our division that used to be in a higher division, and they managed to do pretty well this past season. We'll overtake them. Don't worry.
All right.
And the college has been adding sports and really expanding what we offer to students, both as a recruitment and retention tool. We know that the athletes, are good students.
Yeah.
So, we've added softball, we've added golf. We actually have esports now.
Yeah.
We have esports. Ludo.
It's a thing.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
I know it's a thing, but I'm older than I look.
We've been in conversation, and this is we've been out there publicly recently. We've been in conversation with the Haverhill YMCA about the potential for building a new facility on our campus. So a partnership between a pool and other things. Yeah, a pool and a fitness center and. A new nice facility for the Haverhill Y on the campus there at
you have a physical space to add buildings and
we have 106 acres, and some of it is undeveloped and open for that sort of thing. We have been planning for a few years now to renovate and hopefully add to our indoor athletic facilities ourselves.
I don't think that community colleges were that cool when I was young.
They're very cool.
It's there's a lot of really great stuff, and to see what's happened with the school in Lawrence over the last decade is phenomenal.
Thank you.
And I think that people definitely need to look at it differently.
If you caught the governor's State of the State address last night, we had 5 of our Lawrence early college students that he referred to up in the audience because that early college program we've got in Lawrence is the largest one in the state. So thank you for noticing that.
I did. Yeah. I was watching a hockey game. Sorry.
Going back and forth.
No disrespect to the governor, but there was a game on. Well, Lane, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it. I'm sorry if there's any disappointment that I'm not Doug.
Oh, you did fine.
We love Doug. We wish him well. We hope he's back next week. But this is Glenn Prezzano from Merrimack Valley Magazine and the 495. Thank you for listening.